All right. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Welcome. I appreciate everybody taking some time to be with us tonight as we're going to go through our league bowling plans. We appreciate you doing it remotely like this, like everything else changing, trying to be safer and just offer alternatives for people. So I'm sure we're going to have more people wander in as we go, but I want to go ahead and get started so that we don't hold anybody else up. So the way this meeting is going to go, typically our preseason meeting this time of year would be just our league officers, but with all the new safety protocols and the changes, we just thought it best to invite everybody. So today we've got some bowlers from last year, from previous years. We've got prospective bowlers that are just looking to see what we're going to do this year. And we welcome everybody for, like I said, taking the time to be with us today. The plan for this is going to be more of a presentation than a meeting, in that we are just going to be explaining kind of what our safety protocol, our league format will look like for this upcoming season. You'll notice as you've come into the room that, that everybody's been muted. And the reason that we've done this with a big group like this, it can just get a little crazy and overwhelming. So this way we'll just present all the information. If you have questions, we're going to utilize the chat feature, which I think is turned off. Give me just a moment here. All right, it looks like the chat feature is up, so you should be able to see somewhere on your screen, probably on the bottom, depending on what format you're using, a chat feature. If you have questions that come up during the presentation, just type them up in the chat. Our plan, what we're going to do is at the conclusion of this meeting, we will post this recording with all of this presentation, along with all of those questions and typed out answers, so that anybody that missed the presentation, if you want to share that information with your teammates or other bowlers in your league, you can just direct them to our Facebook page or to our website, where they can find all of that information along with this presentation. Some of the key things that I'm going to talk about today, number one and the most important, is creating a safe environment. Look, we understand that everybody's got different opinions on the virus, its severity, and what the response should be. But I will tell you that as an organization, we will be erring on the side of caution and really focusing on taking into account any actions that we can to create a safe environment for both the bowlers and for our staff. So we're going to do any and everything that we can to make sure that you feel safe and that you're comfortable when you're here bowling in your league. Things are definitely going to be different, as it seems to be the case with just about everything today. We have a lot of changes that I'm going to try and explain as best I can today, but like I said, it's definitely going to be different than the league that you've bowled in the past. Plans are going to change. Look, it seems like everything right now changes on just about a daily basis. So we're learning as we go. The plan we're presenting today is how we're going to start the league season, but who knows what may change. Directives from the governor's office or from higher ups that make us force us to change things, or maybe things loosen and we can go back to a more typical format. So as things change, we promise that we'll do our best to share that information with you, be as transparent as possible. I know that this particular meeting is probably a week late, but honestly, we wanted to wait as long as we can to make sure that what we had put together made sense and that it would work with all the plans that we've got. So the last thing here is that some of the decisions about formats and things will be left up to the individual leagues to vote on, just as they've done in the past. However, the bulk of the policies that we're going to talk about today are going to be intended to be across all leagues, so those won't be up for negotiation. Give me 1 second here. We're having an issue with the chat feature. Mine came through, but there we go. See if that changed it. It did. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Learning technology as we go. I want to address a couple frequently asked questions just to get these out of the way before we get too deep into this. Number one, when will leagues start? This is really going to be up to the leagues. Honestly, with the plan that we've put together here and the Reopen Indiana Stage 4.5 that we're currently in, we can begin facilitating leagues at any time. So we're going to leave it up to the league officers and captains to get together and determine what their start date will be, and then just communicate that with us. We understand that some leagues may want to wait a little bit to see if things change. Others want to start right away. Just communicate that with us and with your other captains and your bowlers, and we'll get you on the schedule and get you going as quick as you'd like to. What happens if someone gets sick or is forced to quarantine? We will go through our entire quarantine policy a little later in the presentation, but the big point that I'd like to make here is that any bowler that is sick or quarantined, whether it's as a result of COVID or they have the flu or they're just out, this year we will not be charging lineage for any missed weeks for any reason. We're not going to ask questions. We don't want to create any stress where bowlers feel like they have to come bowl, but they're questioning if they should. If you're questioning, you don't feel well, you're under the weather, we'd rather err on the side of caution, so we will not charge lineage for missed weeks. Now, this is one of those points where individual leagues will have an opportunity to vote and make a policy, and that will be whether or not they want to charge their prize fund for those missed weeks. So we'll leave that, the prize money, up to the leagues to decide, but as far as lineage is concerned, we won't be charging any for any missed weeks. Is there a scenario in which a league might be canceled? Look, the one thing that we've learned in this whole process is to avoid using words like ever or never, because things seem to change all the time. So we are not designating a point at which we would say leagues are canceled or postponed, but obviously we can't foresee the future. Who knows what may come. So I guess we're leaving that up to what may be. But as I said before, if there is a scenario like that that is presented, we'll do our absolute best to communicate that information as soon as we can to everyone. And probably the last one and the most timely right now is will we have to wear masks? With the most recent governor's mandate, the mask is the big question. There are some scenarios in which we're going to ask people to wear masks in our facility, but you will not have to wear them during your entire time in league bowling. In fact, I have a chart here that will explain exactly when you do have to wear a mask and when you don't. So I'd like to go through this real quick. So times when we would expect our bowlers to wear a mask would only be when they are entering the facility and they are not in their bowler's area, which we are defining as both the tile area within their pair, as well as the area directly behind their pair, the round table with the tables and chairs there. So you enter the building, you've got your equipment. We hope you have your mask on as you come in. You find out your team's bowling on lanes 5 and 6. You walk down to 5 and 6. Once you're in that space of 5 and 6, you can remove your mask and leave it off during the entire time that you remain in that space. Now, if you leave that area, if you're wandering through the building, you go to use the restroom, or as our second bullet point here, if you went to the pro shop, for example, we're going to ask that you put your mask back on. But if you're in your bowler's area, if you're bowling, then you don't have to have one on. The only other time that you'd need to wear one is if you were just spectating or wandering throughout the facility, you're checking on other bowlers, I said going to use the restroom or something like that, we ask that you put a mask back on. You're with your teammates, you're in your bowler's area, you don't have to wear a mask. Clearly, while you're on the approach bowling, you do not have to wear a mask. And any time that you're eating or drinking, you would also be allowed not to wear a mask. That would include if you were sitting at the bar or at a table in the restaurant. In all those scenarios, you could be without a mask. Some of the major changes that we're going to talk about, the biggest one is a half capacity bowling format. We've been talking to the Bowling Proprietors Association of America, as well as other bowling centers around the country to get some ideas. And it's a format that other people are practicing, which allows for the most people to bowl the most number of weeks while also limiting the number of people in the building. So I'll do my best to explain what that's going to look like here in a little bit, but that's the biggest thing that we're going to implement is this new format. We will be taking, as the center, we'll be taking over the secretarial and treasury duties for all of our leagues. And this is really to limit the contact, and the center will handle those duties in-house so that we're limiting money being passed around or people being in the office utilizing the computer. We've already updated our BLS software so that we can put all of our standing sheets online. So if you don't want to use in-paper standing sheets, you can get it that way a little safer, but we're going to take over all those duties for this season. We're not going to allow any advance payments. I know that in the past we've had teams or bowlers that like to pay for weeks in advance. The issue is that this year we just don't know, as I said, what scenario may lay ahead. If a bowler were to be asked to quarantine or they were sick or if the league were to be postponed, and then it would be a real nightmare trying to track down all those refunds and who was due what. So just to be safe and clear, no one will be able to pay in advance. You pay each week as you go, and that way we know if there's no bowling or you're not here, you don't owe any money. We do have a scenario, I guess people in the past have elected, if they're really bent on, they want to prepay, you could always buy, say, a gift card at one time and then utilize that gift card to pay for your league fees as you go throughout the season. But again, we wouldn't do refunds on a gift card if something were to be canceled. So the best bet here for everyone is just pay as you go week to week. And then the last thing is that we're going to implement a self-screening policy. I've got another chart that we'll go through, which will be posted throughout the facility that'll explain when you should stay home, when you should avoid the facility, and when you're safe to bowl. The only thing with any self-screening policy is it relies entirely on the honesty and openness of the bowlers. And we can do whatever we want to create safe policies here, but if someone just decides they're gonna, they're not feeling well, they're under the weather, or they know they were in contact with someone that's sick, but they're gonna go ahead and bowl anyway, they're taking everyone else's health into risk, as well as the chance that we could be shut down or go back into a closed policy, which really is what we're trying to avoid. Okay, so the new format, as I said, this is a little unique, but I'll try my best to explain this. Essentially, the way that we're gonna do this, the most important note here is that there would only be one team per pair. So if at any given time, the league would be split in half, and for the first 90 minutes of the league, half of the league would bowl. We would break for a 30-minute cleaning and sanitizing. When that A shift, the bowlers would leave. The second half of the league would come in as the B shift, and then they would have 90 minutes to complete their bowling. We did some testing with this with some teams in advance to make sure 90 minutes seems to be plenty of time to be able to get a five-man team to bowl 3 games. You can get it done a lot quicker. If you're moving with purpose, you can go a little slower. If you're taking your time and taking breaks. We're gonna have to implement a couple policies to ensure that teams get done. The big one is that to make sure that we can keep this schedule and that we're fair to all bowlers, is that any incomplete frames at the end of your 90 minutes would be marked as 0. So your scheduled league time start is 6 o'clock. By 7:30, whatever frames you have incomplete, you take 0, as we've got to get those lanes turned off and flipped over for the next group. Now, again, in our test runs and talking to other centers, that should never happen. Any team that's bowling with purpose, if you're up on the left lane, you go. As soon as you're done, you're up on the right lane, you bowl again. You should be able to finish with plenty of time left over, and we'll move people through that. We are also putting together a league schedule in which each team would bowl an even number of A shift weeks and an even number of B shift weeks. Now, you may not switch every other week back and forth, but over the course of the season, you would bowl an equal number of early and late shifts. The other thing here to remember is that since we're cutting the league in half and we're restricting the time, we're really only adding about 30 additional minutes of time to the league. So if your league started at 6 in the past, we generally expected that team to be done around 9. Where now, with this additional 30 minutes of cleaning, it's going to push that closer to 9:30. Part of this format would be that you would be competing with the team on the pair next to you. So again, trying to make it as fair as possible instead of one team bowling early and bowling against a team that's late, knowing their scores and knowing the condition. If you were bowling on lanes 1 and 2, you would be competing against the team that's on lanes 3 and 4. And then again, 5 and 6 would bowl against team on 7 and 8. This will help, again, make it a little fair. People can see what scores they need to bowl against. You're seeing the team, but you're just at a little further distance away. As I said, we'll have a schedule that would break out an equal number of A and B shifts. You may not alternate every single week, but over the course of the season, it should be about an even number of which ones you bowl early and late. With a 30-minute cleaning and sanitizing, focusing on that being getting the bowlers out, cleaning and preparing the lanes for the incoming shift, we would not have time to re-oil. So we won't re-oil between. However, there's half as many games being bowled in that 90 minutes as there would have been in the past. And you're bowling against a team on the same shift as you, so they're seeing the same condition relatively that you are. So again, it's our way of creating the most competitive element while also remaining as fair as possible. And then the last note here, again, where leagues would have a vote, is that we'll leave it up to individual leagues to adjust their start time as they want. We're adding 30 minutes, maybe a little more, to each league. If the league wants to vote to start 15 minutes early and end 15 minutes late, we're fine with that. If they want to start 30 minutes early and end at their normal ending time, that would be okay. If they want to start at their regular time and just go later, that's also fine. We're really leaving that up to you guys to meet with your captains or your officers and decide which you would like to do. And again, all of these formats, all of this is about social distancing, spreading boulders out. If your team has got a full pair of lanes, you should have plenty of space where you're not close to each other. We have other social distancing guidelines throughout the buildings, like the 6-foot dots at our point of sale areas and stuff. And obviously social distancing means avoiding things like high fives, sharing towels and rosin bags. So we're really gonna lean on the bowlers to do their best. We're giving you the space. Now we're gonna ask you to do what you can to space yourselves out and just be safe. Just to show kind of what that new format would look like as an example here, you can see this would be a league that would be scheduled to start at 6 o'clock. So from 6 to 6:05, the A shift would have their 5 minutes of practice. At 6:05, those lanes would flip on for competition and they would have 90 minutes, meaning by 7:35, they would have to be done. Any incomplete frames at that time are marked 0. The lanes are turned off. We're gonna ask at 7:35, when your lanes go off, you do your absolute best to clear out so that we can get cleaning in the next group that can come in. If you want to stage in, say, the meeting rooms or into the restaurant, if that helps you move your equipment and then wait there so you're not rushed out, that's always an option, but give us as much room as possible to clean. We're going to have a little extra staff so that in 30 minutes we can facilitate that cleaning so that by 8:05 we're ready for the B shift to come in for their 5 minutes of practice, and then again their 90 minutes of competition after that. And to make sure that it's fair, even though there's lane availability after the B shift, they would have the same 90 minutes to get their frames done, and then they would take zeros after. So it's the same policy for both the A shift and the B shift each week. For the secretarial and treasury duties, the big thing here is that we're trying to limit contact points. We don't want somebody being responsible for handing out and collecting up all those money envelopes, all the cash inside there and counting that. Instead, we're gonna ask each team to come to the front counter to pay their weekly dues. We've got forms and tracking information, so a single representative from a team would come to the cashier. They would pay us with cash, credit card, check, whatever their preferred method is. We'll give that individual back a paper receipt, so they've got a copy that they were paid for that week. And then they would alert us if they had any bowlers that were quarantined or out at that time. We would adjust the payment, and then that's how we'll take the league fees. Again, as we said before, no advance payments, just because if you might be paying for 5 bowlers this week and 4 bowlers next week, who knows with quarantining and what's going on. So we wouldn't allow those advance payments. The team representative would just tell us as they come up, hey, we've got 2 guys out tonight because their wife or their husband is homesick and they're playing it safe, they're quarantining. So, and then we'll adjust it at that time. And any team that wants to see a copy of their pay record at any time will have a paper copy that shows each week the amount paid, the number of bowlers. We can provide a copy of that to that team upon request. Our self-screening policy, so we came up with a 3-tier system, which I think is pretty common with a lot of businesses and schools and things like that, which we'll go over in just a sec. As I said, we're gonna post copies of that policy throughout the facility, but that will show exactly when I should bowl or when I should stay home if there's ever a question. We're gonna reserve the right that any team that has multiple members within that team that have tested positive, we may ask that team to quarantine. It'll just be taken on a case-by-case basis. But if there's a potential that an entire team has been compromised or exposed, then we may ask them to quarantine. And again, as we said a couple times before, anybody that's quarantined or sick, they're not paying lineage for that week. So this is the chart here that shows our self-assessment policy. And I'll just go through this real quickly. Level 1 would be our no restrictions level. Obviously, anybody here, they're symptom-free, they haven't had any direct or extended contact with someone that has tested positive, and all we're gonna ask of those individuals is that they adhere to the same social distancing guidelines as everybody else. So stay on your pair, wear a mask when you need to, take it off when you don't, keep distance as much as possible. Level 2 would be our self-monitoring phase. This would be anybody that has had limited contact with an individual that's tested positive. So maybe you work with someone that tested positive, but you don't work closely with them, they're on the other side of the office or they're on your assembly line or something to that effect, then we were just that you're in that self-monitor phase. You haven't had a lot of direct or extended contact with them. Or if you're living with someone who has symptoms, but they've not tested positive, your husband or wife or roommate, they feel a little under the weather, they don't think it's COVID, but they're not feeling great, then you would fall into that self-monitor phase as well. And lastly, if you have a member of your team that's tested positive, even if you don't believe there's any direct contact there, we're gonna ask that you self-monitor. And all that really means is that in addition to adhering to the same social distancing guidelines as everyone else, we're just gonna ask you to be extra cautious and look for symptoms within yourself. So if you fall into any of these three bullet points apply to you, and you feel pretty good, but you've had a scratchy throat or you've got a runny nose, or you had a little bit of an upset stomach, just to not take any chances, we'd ask you then quarantine yourself. But if one of these bullet points apply to you, but you've got no symptoms, you feel great, you've got no other problems, then you're allowed to still bowl. We just want you to kind of self-monitor and be hyper aware of yourself. And then level 3 would be our quarantine level. Obviously, anybody that's received a positive COVID test result is quarantined. Anybody that's had direct or extended contact with someone that's tested positive, so that coworker that we talked about before, maybe they share a cubicle with you or you're riding in a truck with them, we're gonna ask that you would quarantine. Even if you don't have symptoms, if you have had some direct extended contact with someone you know to be sick with COVID, then you would quarantine. Or if the person that you're living with, let's say they have been tested and it's a positive result, or the last bullet point here, if you have any symptoms, or definitely if you have multiple symptoms, if you have any symptoms that are common with COVID, which I'm sure you've seen or you can find online, then we would also ask you to quarantine. And what we're saying by quarantine is that you would not bowl for 14 days or until you've had a negative COVID test result. So maybe that you've had a coworker that tested positive and worked directly next to you. You go get a COVID test, you get a result in 5 days. Now you don't have to take 2 weeks off. It was a negative test and return to bowling immediately. But if you prefer to wait that out, you don't want to get the test done, then we're going to ask you to wait the 2 weeks just to be safe. As I said, in all things, we're trying to err on the side of caution here. With all of these things, communication is going to be the key to us. Our ability to run leagues this season, to keep bowlers safe, to communicate information, all relies on having some open lines of communication with you. We're going to be sending out league contact forms to our league officials. These contact forms ask for a point person for each league, but they're also going to ask for information like your start date and time once you decide on those. We'd like to get those forms back by the end of August. We'll try and get them out to you here by the end of this week. And then in addition to that, when we post this presentation, along with it, we're going to post a link to fill out a form where you can give us your contact information so that we will have an email database and a phone tree where we can reach out to people to let them know if something changes, something's happened, league's been postponed, or someone's tested positive, and we can use it for contact tracing. So we'd like to have at least one member of each team fill out that contact form. Honestly, if everybody wants to fill it out, that'd be great for us. I think the more people that we have in that contact list, the better. And again, just kind of in closing here, really our number one goal in this whole thing is focusing on safety. Look, not just for the fact that we want to make sure that you're safe, that we keep our bowlers healthy and our staff healthy, but there's always this looming cloud over our head that if this keeps getting worse, that they could shut us back down again. And if we've got to take extra safety precautions today that allow us to stay open longer so we can create an environment where you can still bowl, you can still compete, then we're going to take those actions. We're going to do whatever we can. We're asking for openness and honesty from you. As I said, we can do everything we want as far as cleaning and distancing, but if somebody wants to just ignore the symptoms, ignore the quarantine policy and come in here, they're risking not only their other bowlers, but they're risking the league being able to continue and go on. As we said before, if you'll be open and honest with us, we will be as transparent with you. As soon as information becomes available, we'll send it out, whether it's an email or by phone. We'll try and have correspondence out at your lanes each week so you know if there's updates or things are changing. We're learning as we go, but as we get that information, we'll make it available to you as quickly as possible. And finally, we want to thank everybody. We appreciate your assistance. We know this is different. It's going to be a different year. And hopefully, things will get better and allow us to, at some point in the season, maybe to go back to a more traditional format. But until that happens, until we feel real comfortable that we can ensure everyone's safety, we're going to move forward with this plan. So I just thank everybody for coming on and being on this meeting today, listening in. I'm going to leave the presentation up for a few minutes so that if you do have questions, you can type them into that chat, which I believe looks like it's working. We've had a couple of types in there already. So yeah, if you would just type any other questions on there. And when we post the presentation, we'll post a list of those questions along with all of our answers for them, just to make sure we got all that information correct and out to everybody. So thanks again. And we look forward to seeing everybody here this league season.